let's discuss 4 tips on how to communicate with a nonverbal child. And today's discussion is really going to be focused on just giving you guys some tips and tricks, some tools, some techniques on how to do basic communication with a child who doesn't have what we call standard verbal output, right? So the first one that we're going to talk about is sign language. And I want to just make sure I put a little bit of a caveat on this and just a little bit of a disclosure. Sign language is its own language. It has its own community and it has its own identity. So if your child is not part of what we call the big D deaf community, then what you're going to be using is adapted signs. You're going to be using baby signs or things that are just not necessarily, they're not true sign language. And so you do need to be respectful of the fact that this is somebody else's language that you're using and somebody else's culture, be mindful of that. But it is an amazing tool to use with nonverbal children. So some very basic signs that you could use with nonverbal children is obviously the sign more, and you could use the sign drink, and you can use the sign eat. Sleep is a good one, and all done, and my turn is an adapted sign that I've used with my children and my patients. So those are really good ones that you could work on with your child, doing them during high frequency, high motivating activities, highly motivating. If they're motivated by food, you can do it during mealtime. If they're motivated by a certain toy, you can do it with a certain toy. So one way to do it during mealtime is the child is sitting in a chair or in a high chair, in their bouncy chair, wherever they are, and you're just giving them a certain piece of food at a time, and then you're just going to be like, okay, do you want more to eat? And you're going to wait for the child to respond. Now, when I say respond, you're not waiting for them to sign necessarily, but you are going to wait for them to give you some sort of communication identification, right? So are they looking at the food? Are they looking at you? Are they looking at, are they kind of making sure that they are focused on the activity that you're doing, not kind of looking in the distance, right? And looking around you. They don't have to look at your eyes. They just need to connect to something that is part of what you're actually doing. So that really is the focus for sign language, and that's really kind of the most important, the first one, and really just a basic one, right? The next one is I really don't want people to underestimate the power of play. Playtime is an important part of learning for children, and it can really be a great tool for parents to bond with their nonverbal and complex needs child, and it really can be any play, right? So the most important thing is through play, children learn to communicate through play. So they learn to trust you and they learn to communicate with you. You learn their body language, you learn their language, which is vital when you're working with a nonverbal and complex needs individual, because when we get to the point where we're going to give them a device, which is another video I will be doing in the future, so absolutely click in and listen to that. But that is definitely one where one of the things your speech pathologist will ask you is, how does your child communicate, right? What do they like? What are their dislikes? And you don't learn that unless you play with your child. And really, it's very important to make sure that you guys do play with your child. And that could be anything, really, putting their music on, spinning toys that they like, vibrating toys that they like. If they're non-ambulatory, just things that are very visual. If they have visual issues, things that are auditory. If they have both visual and auditory difficulties, you can use things that vibrate. Music with a low bass, kind of those bass vibrations. You can maybe put them on the mat, put the music down and kind of let the floor vibrate, right? That a lot of my kiddos with both who are both blind and deaf, or who have visual impairment and hearing impairments of some kind, really love vibrations or textures, lots of different textures, and you'll learn what kind of textures they like and don't like. Those are all really good activities that you can have and you can use with your nonverbal child, complex needs child, to play with them and engage with them. And really engage with them just like you would any neurotypical child. Those neural connections have to fire, and those don't happen during therapy. Those happen during play with their caregiver, and whoever that is, mom or dad or nanny or grandma or grandpa, it doesn't really matter who the individual is. It's just the individual who spends the most time with your child. All right. And then our third one is going to be reading body language. So this is definitely one that's really important. I have a lot of children, especially my children with cerebral palsy, will have a lot of tension in body language and relaxation that's very clear on like when they like something, when they don't like something. And but it also could be, you know, a child, your autistic child will also have that, right? So that's really about, you know, they may turn away from something, they may verbalize or they may stomp at it. It really just, it doesn't really matter what it is that they're doing, but really feed into their body language and really think about kind of what are they doing with their body. Almost 90% of what we do is through body language, even if we're verbal, right? We always talk about facial expressions and intonation, and all those kinds of things tie into knowing how you know what the child is doing, right? And so really looking at those nonverbal cues of your child are going to be really important. So if you're doing an activity that they really enjoy, really cue into how you know they enjoy that and focus on those, because you'll see those repeated nonverbal cues through other things that they may like, right? And the same when they don't like something, you know, really cue into, oh, that definitely tells me they don't like that. And that's a good way, because then you can start modeling language around their emotions, around what they're feeling. Because the most important is that your child needs to internalize how they feel with communication. And so if you just read it and then just react to it and don't communicate with them, they're not going to get that connection, that what I feel means this. So then when we get to the point where we want to talk about, you know, therapy and really talking about how you get them, you know, if a parent tells me, I really want them to tell me like they're in pain. Well, they've probably told you multiple times they are in pain. You haven't read the cues all the time. So now we don't know how to pair that with a word, and the child doesn't know how to communicate that. So one of the most important things is making sure that whenever your child has an emotion, whether it's a happy emotion or a sad emotion or an angry emotion or a frustrated emotion or a confused emotion, that you pair it with some sort of language and some sort of connection, right? And that then internalizes, it will help your child internalize that emotion to that language. And so when we then give them a communication device, which then has that same language, they will be able to communicate it to you because they will know what they're feeling. And that's the most important. They need to know how they're feeling. And they do. They just don't know how to communicate what they're feeling. So that's really the most important. And kind of the final and fourth one, which is what my entire career is built around, is alternative communication methods. Now, really, there's loads you can do before you even have a high-tech communication device. There are loads of free apps that you can use. You can use picture cards. Now, this is not saying that you need to use an entire system, but even just using very simple things just to get them to start communicating very clearly to you those needs and wants and commenting. Now, a lot of the therapy is going to be based on wants and needs. I really don't believe that is the focus of what we should be doing. When I use a lot of alternative modes of communication in my therapy, I really focus more on getting the child to tell me things that they like, or things that they're motivated by, or things that they want to talk about. So giving them as much exposure to as many things as you think that they enjoy really helps give them those opportunities, and doesn't just close them off to, it's great that they can tell you they want food and they want drink, but that's not what makes us human. What makes us human is connecting, and it's commenting, and it's saying, I saw this today and I want to tell you and I want to share it with you and I want you to be part of my world, right? And so children with complex needs have a really hard time with that concept. And so really what you want to do is your communication method, it doesn't matter which one it is, But whatever communication method you feel is a fit for your family and your child, that you really not only focus on just the wants and the needs, but how do you get your child to share and to connect and to really be with you in those moments and in those communication partnerships and those communication interactions. So those are really kind of probably the 4 most important tips that I can think of. There are, there's a plethora of tools and techniques out there that are used, that I personally use in my practice as well. But the most important is that you need to understand that as a parent, you are in the home with your child the most, right? So it's not during therapy that your child is getting the most out of communicating. It's going to be outside of therapy. So really cueing into different tools and techniques you can use with your child are going to be vital to the success of your child's communication and vital to the success of their ability to thrive and continue to grow. So I really hope that was really helpful. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and click that subscribe bell and you will get notification on any new videos and any new content that's coming out. And till next time.